Hello, everyone. My name is Marvin. I want to thank Stefanos. 3 years ago, I came here for the first time, sitting in the seats where you are, and with my neighbor from Bali, Stefanos. And I said, hey, I'm going to this Bansko thing. You want to come? And he's like, why? And he came, and it's a bit surreal that we're here together. So thank you so much for being here. So just to get an idea, I'm going to make this pretty short and sweet. How many of you are thinking about launching a podcast? All right, awesome. You came to the right place. And how many of you have a podcast? All right, so I expect some hard questions from you guys, so this is awesome. So let's jump in here. All right, this is how I feel every time I listen to a podcast. I don't know about you guys, but I always feel like I get something great out of it. And let's talk about the stats. So by the end of this year, we're expecting 500 million listeners. I get the question all the time, is there just too many podcasts? And the answer is no. The reason being is that there's a lot of podcast shows, but there's not a lot of active podcasts. So that's an opportunity for you because most people will quit after the third episode. And if you make it to episode 20, then you're probably in the top 1%. So there's always room at the top, okay? So in terms of who I am, when I was here 3 years ago, I was not a podcast manager. I was a copywriter I was working for an agency that did Amazon copywriting. And then something happened. ChatGPT happened. And I was like, uh-oh, this is really gonna affect the business, the agency. And it did. So I did some soul searching. And before my Nomad journey 6 years ago, I was binging on different podcasts. There was one called Travel Like a Boss with Johnny FD. I listened to it, it inspired me to travel. There was a couple called Words with Winos where they drink wine and talk about their travels, so it got a little loose at the end, and it was amazing. So what I want to convey to you guys, encourage you guys, with podcasting, value first. Don't focus too much about yourself or your guests. Focus on the value you're giving to your audience. And so it either educates, inspires, or entertains. And please don't be boring, all right? So when I was connecting the dots, I ran into an old friend, Chelsea. She has the Life After Medicine podcast, and I realized it was a funnel for her business. And she's been very open to how successful her business is. She hit 6 figures a couple years ago. And that helped me connect the dots to, okay, so this is what podcasting can do for you. I don't manage any of these podcasts, but I am definitely a listener to them. And success leaves clues. Christabella has a course for digital nomads. It's a high-ticket course, and she often talks about the success stories on her podcast. All right? So let's get technical. Now, earlier this week, I ran an unconference. You can take a picture of this for all the different technical things. I do have a shorter presentation with links to all these, so you can message me for that as well. But when it comes to recording, you do need a microphone, but start small, start easy. Just use your iPhone microphone. You can graduate to a better one, but what I don't want you to do is focus on the technical stuff, focus on the content. Content is king. The value offer is more important. There's a lot of tools out there for editing that uses AI to help make your voice sound good. It doesn't have to sound like an audiobook. I know I'm maybe upsetting a couple audio engineers, but as long as it sounds good and it's not competing, it should be fine. When it comes to recording, you have a couple different free options. The option I recommend to my clients is Riverside. It records high quality video and audio, and you can use it, even if you're just doing an audio podcast, you can use the videos for social media, all right? And in terms of hosting is where your podcast lives. So you host it there. You can host it for free on Spotify for podcasters. There's a couple paid versions that I recommend, like Buzzsprout. And then you apply to be on Apple Podcast and on Spotify. All right? So launching. Oh, there's no audio. Anyways. So this is a show called Hot One. So I point this out is because the show itself, it's not a podcast, but it's just an interview. But they found a unique way to make interviews a lot more interesting. If you're not familiar with the show, they have to eat progressively hotter hot wings throughout the show, and it's hilarious. It's one of the top shows on this YouTube channel. So when you're thinking about launching a podcast, think how you can be unique. Look at the niche, research your competition, find your unique voice within that niche, how you can make it interesting, what's your spin. The formats are solo episodes, interviews, and panel discussions. And I would do a mix of both when you're starting to see what resonates with your audience. And then decide if you're going to do audio only, a little bit of video, and then go from there. All right? So this is the launch strategy. This is Stefanos, because 6 months ago, him and I were talking about him doing a podcast. Stefanos, if you don't know, he's behind a lot of very successful YouTubers. And so he has a lot of knowledge. He works with the NAS Academy. And I said, if you did a podcast, I would say subscribe now would be, or subscribe for more, very popular YouTube term. And then the name below it would be something for SEO. And so you would have, when launching, I recommend recording at least 8 episodes, so you have maybe 2 months worth of episodes. Batch record them, so you're never chasing your tail. You always have episodes ready, so you can have a vacation, or if something comes up, the podcast will continue living on. Select a host, apply to Apple Podcast, release a trailer, and then launch with at least 3 or more episodes. This gives a little bit of a variety of, you could do a solo episode, you could be an interview episode, but it gets people interested in what you have to offer right away, and they can binge on it. All right? And then run a giveaway on social media so people can share the podcast and write reviews. So this is the way I would launch a podcast. All right, a little meme. I love memes. I love dad jokes, so I hope you enjoy them. All right, I do a lot of podcast audits, and the biggest issue I find is clarity. You have to state your case within the first 30 seconds. And so Lex Friedman is great at doing that. You guys know who Mark Zuckerberg is, but you need a compelling reason to listen to the podcast. So he sets that up right away. So when people are scrolling looking for a solution for something, you give it to them. Because if you don't give it to them in the first 30 seconds, somebody else will. So this is my episode intro formula. It starts with a profound question, waking up tired. We all can experience that. Introduce your guests, why they're the authority in this field, what they'll take away from the episode, and then for retention, why they need to listen until the end. Listen to the end because you will get X, and that'll help people want to listen to the very end. So the first question. Oftentimes, the default first question is, how did you get into this? How did you get into real estate? How did you get into nursing? It's a very common thing to do when we're talking to people. But it gets pretty boring if that's the first question. It's a good question. It might be a good question for the beginning or the end of the episode. Chris does a great job. He repeats something that Alex Hormozi says that's very deep. And as a listener, you're hooked right away. It's a very profound statement. And then Alex has time to think about the answer. And then you're off to the races. So make your first question very powerful. And like I said earlier, always be delivering value at the beginning. You can talk about other things at the end, and you can even pitch saying, we'll talk about how they got into this at the end, so stick around. So again, no one cares about your guest. They care about the value your guest brings. So avoid really long resumes and wrap things in storytelling. So we'll get into that. So oftentimes you get people have advice they want to give out. And it's hard to connect the dots. And remember, people are self-interested. So when you're talking about being tired and what to do when you're tired, wrap it in a story that's relatable. I was on a long-haul flight. I was at Disneyland with my family. I got tired. You have to have a beginning, an obstacle to overcome, and the takeaway that's relatable to your audience. And then your advice will resonate with them. All right, strategy for growth. So I would release an episode once a week. I would take 3 to 10 minute clips, put them on YouTube, because that's where people will discover your podcast. Make sure whatever you post on YouTube and social media has value on its own. Oftentimes I'll see podcast clips out of context. It's just some random thing that you've walked into the middle of a conversation and you have no idea what they're talking about. So make sure that clip has value, even if you have to cut it up and shorten it. And if you have a business, make sure it just funnels to your business, not your podcast, because then it just prolongs the distance between you and transacting with them. Take the transcripts, turn it into a blog, a LinkedIn newsletter, a Substack. One of the things I failed to mention here is put a lead magnet, something of value to capture their emails, a checklist, a masterclass, a workshop. And then make sure to guest on at least 3 podcasts a month. There's a service called Podmatch, podmatch.com, and you can pitch to different podcasts. And so that's the best way to grow your podcast and your brand, because everybody that's listening to that podcast all listen to podcasts. So if they hear you and they like what you have to offer, they're gonna find you on their podcast player and start following you. We can't say that for the other areas. All right. I hope you guys know what a podcast is by now. So let's talk about audio only versus video podcasting. Video podcasting has gotten a lot more popular. I do recommend it, but when you're just starting, audio is fine, and just putting clips on social and YouTube is fine too. The reason why is that there's always going to be a lot of friction when it comes to video. Do you have the right lighting? Do you think you look good that day? There's a lot of friction, but if you just do audio, then you can just do it in your pajamas, and it's much, much easier. So make it easy, and then you can start experimenting with video and things like that. All right. This is probably what everybody's here for, the money. So in terms of monetization, this is the list of all the ways you can make money. Remember, podcasting is a long game, but you can start with coaching and consulting, so selling your time. If you look at these women, Kristen has a book called Digital Nomads for Dummies. It's like a $10 book, but it gets you to buy it, and maybe you'll buy some of her other things like her treats and the other things she offers. And then Christabella, again, has a high ticket digital nomad course I think has a lot of value. And she also has an affiliate program. So if you were to start a digital nomad podcast, I would encourage you to contact her and consider being an affiliate with her until you have your own course. And then in terms of ads, we know YouTube works on AdSense. In the podcast world, it's not there yet, it's coming. So this is an ad marketplace, Libsyn Ads. So they're paying about $20 per 1,000 impressions. So you do have to grow a bigger audience. You can also just go to sponsors directly and try to negotiate a higher return. All right, so your podcast will grow your brand and your business. And one of the things I want to encourage you, and I want everybody to start a podcast, because it goes beyond just monetization. One of my clients, she just went to LA to be in live podcasts. People have offered her lucrative job opportunities because she's interviewed them on her podcast. And so if there's somebody in your industry and you want to get to know them, you start a podcast, invite them on your podcast, because then it gives them a reason. You have some authority because you have a podcast. Everybody needs content for their LinkedIn or their socials, so you can give it to them as an exchange, and the value that you get, you can share with everyone else. And they will know if you do a great job. Hey, if they need somebody to do something for them, they'll go to you. All right? And then also, ask the person next to you. There's so many people here that have so much experience and knowledge. Ask the person to your right or left to be on your podcast. And again, have fun. There are no rules. And there we go. And if you want this presentation, just connect with me on LinkedIn. All right.